So, all right, I think we are officially ready to rock and roll. So we are live and ready to get underway with our third and final installment of the GMHA Starter Distance Ride Zoom series. What I wish I'd known then, getting started in distance riding. And it is my honor and privilege to be here in conversation tonight with my friend Sara Lareau. And I'm going to tell you so much about Sara in just a minute, but I'm just going to go totally off script and tell you that she's an amazing horseman and has done so much to pursue her own goals in distance riding, but also to educate and inspire others. And we're just really excited to have her with us tonight to learn from her and her experience in the sport. So our goal tonight, as it has been all along, is to share with you some of the lessons we have learned and continue to learn over our distance careers. And out of our three panelists, not one of us would even begin to say that we know everything there is to know about distance riding. But one of the things that I think we can agree on is that the community is really inclusive and welcoming and excited to get new riders involved and to answer questions and to help you learn how to do this really fun sport. And because trying a new equestrian sport is an intimidating thing to do, we are here to hopefully alleviate your worries and make you realize that distance riding is something you can do and you can try it and you should try it. It's a lot of fun. So we're recording tonight's session. This will be shared and posted on GMHA's YouTube channel after tonight's presentation. So if you have to drop off early, you'll be able to hear the rest of it there. And if you have any friends who you think might want to know about this information, they can also access it there afterwards. And I believe it's also a correct statement that our first starter ride of the season, which will be held in conjunction with May's Pleasure Rides at the end of the month, has officially opened. So if tonight's presentation gets you excited to try the sport, you can have your first opportunity to do a GMHA distance ride in just a few weeks' time. So as I said, the setup of our Zoom call tonight is going to keep everyone's videos off except for mine, and it's going to also keep audio off for the duration for everyone other than myself and Sara. But if you have questions, please utilize the chat feature and we'll make sure we address those at the end. So without any further ado, I am going to get going here. And introduce you to my friend and fellow distance enthusiast, Sara Lareau. Sara had a late start with horses and didn't start riding consistently until her late teens, but she has had an interest in distance riding since a young age. As a child, she would check all of the horse picture books out of the library to absorb week after week, and one particular book stood out to her, a book on equine sports with a section on endurance riding. Sara graduated from Cazenovia College in 2012 with a degree in business management with a specialization in equine studies, which provided her with an excellent wealth of knowledge to develop her hobby. And then she adds, just kidding, she uses the business management side for actual work. In 2015, she met an amazing mentor who made the official connection to the distance sports, and the rest is history. Sara competes regularly on her two Morgans, Fritz and Cooper, and has acquired an Arabian, Hayes, to become her third competitive horse. She also frequently is seen loaning out her Wakalusa, Whiskey, who requires a slight rider but is all business when eating up the trail. Sara began competing in 15-mile competitive CDRs and has more recently worked her way up to 50-mile endurance and 3-day competitive trail rides. She is hoping to reach her 3,000 lifetime extra miles at the end of this season. I have no doubt that she's going to make that happen. So yay, Sara. So happy to be here to chat with you and to hear more about your distance journey. So
wow, that was quite the introduction, Christina.
So you kind of gave us a little teaser though, as we were getting to know you about how you got started in distance riding, but can you tell us a little more about this mentor and how you officially made the transition to the sport?
Yeah. So I'm not even sure where to start really. We met by chance, and we sort of I don't even remember how the conversation started, but I think it went something along the lines of, "Oh, you ride horses. That's really cool. I ride horses too. What do you do with your horse?" And it snowballed, and I was like, "Wow, like that's something I've always dreamed of doing, but I've never had like an opportunity to go do it." And her name was Nancy, and she doesn't compete any longer, but she literally took my hand and took me to my first ride, and like that was it. Like I was just hooked. Like I was so sore and I thought my horse was going to die, but I was hooked.
What was that first ride?
It was a 15-mile CDR at Kedron Valley Stables in June. They actually don't hold that ride anymore. It used to be a 3-day 100, I believe. And that was back in 2015. And like I said, they no longer hold it, but that's where it was, which is right down the road from GMHA. So similar
Right,
territory.
right, right. Um, so were you mostly excited about trying it? Were you a little intimidated when you went to do that first 15-mile ride? Where were you at in terms of your head when you got started?
That's a really good question. So I was really confident in my horse, Fritz. Fritz, bless him, he is amazing. And I wasn't so much worried about him in like his own headspace. I was worried about if he could do it physically. So I wasn't worried about like being on the road or whatnot. And my own physical limitations, like was I ready for it? Was I fit enough? I think that was one of the only rides I've ever developed a stitch in my side, and I needed to drink more water, obviously.
We all
And
always need to drink water.
yeah. Um, but Fritz really took it in stride, and I do remember in particular that he started he they get to the point where they start to breathe more heavily, and I was very concerned that I was just doing too much for him or asking him to do too much for me.
Sure.
And Nancy was explaining like this is normal. Like this is what heavy work looks like and it's okay.
Right.
And having her there to tell me that and explain that it's okay, like your horse isn't going to die, um, was so instrumental because I think I would have shied away a little bit, but she was so seasoned and I totally believed her and she was my rock.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Having someone who knows the ropes and knows what you're doing is everything, right? To kind of reassure you at those moments where you're doubting
Absolutely.
yourself, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was she able to ride with you at that first ride, or was she kind of more meeting you along the way?
Nope, she did. She rode with me, on that ride. I think it's also the only ride Fritz has ever pulsed down to a 44 at the end. They might have been a little lenient with me. Um, but yeah, after that, I didn't ride with Nancy so much because our horses didn't really pair up very well.
Sure.
But she was supportive in the sense that she found other people for me to ride with,
Hmm.
um, after that initial ride.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. That's such a great way to, it's like a soft introduction to the sport.
Very
Yeah.
I was very fortunate.
Yeah. So I know one of the things you absolutely wanted to talk about today was equipment, and we have some extra photos to show in a little bit. So I don't know if you want to kind of talk about that now or if you want to talk about that later, but I know people are always asking me like what kind of equipment I need to go do distance riding and do I need anything special and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um
I think I'll just brush on it and then the pictures later on can kind of reinforce it. But I use different equipment on every single horse. Part of it's because I really like each horse to have its own equipment, but I have found that most horses prefer different things. So you'll see like I use a S Hackamore, which I think you talked about in the previous discussion, Chris, on Cooper and Whiskey. Fritz goes in a bit, and Hayes also goes in a bit. We've got hoof boots on some and shoes on others. Mainly Fritz because he's a show Morgan is what I usually reference him as, but he will throw his front shoes if or his front boots if I put boots on him.
Okay.
He just has so much action, so he gets shoes in the front. I'm trying to think of other stuff. We'll touch on it more later. But different types of saddles. Whiskey goes in a treeless because I found that he's gated. He's difficult to fit, and the treeless just does him really well.
Is Whiskey the Wakalusa?
Whiskey is the Wakalusa. Yep. Cooper and Fritz go in a Western style endurances, but they're both different.
Okay.
And Hayes is actually in an English style monoflap county saddle.
So when you say you use different equipment on everybody, you literally mean completely different equipment on everybody.
Literally. Each horse has his own thing.
When you're like you're kind of in a unique position because you've started obviously several different horses in this sport, and how did you go about figuring out what they wanted? Like, where did you start, and was that where you're at now with them?
Oh my gosh, it's been trial and error with everybody. I think one thing that really sticks out in my mind is that I had for a long, long time, and you'll see it in the photos, I had a synthetic Fabtron Western saddle that I used on Fritz for such a long time. And I didn't actually really want to. It's just that nothing else really worked for us.
Gotcha.
Until I found a Tucker saddle that worked really well for both of us. But it was the most god awful thing. But I actually had a lot of people ask me, can I ride a saddle that has a horn? Like, can I ride in a saddle that has a horn? Of course you can.
Right.
If it fits you and your horse, of course you can. Actually, for the longest time, I still had those old Weaver saddle horn saddlebags that I would, stuff that you just don't see every day. People usually have fancier stuff, but it worked for me and it worked for Fritz, and we went with it.
Right. Right. Just for our friends who are viewing us, am I correct? And are these Fritz's ears coming over the wooden bridge in the photo here?
Yep, that's
Okay.
Fritz. Fritz in the center, and I'll just tell real quick.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side in the fall foliage there, that's Fritz as well. Top left is Cooper and I at a ride in Pennsylvania. That was just kind of a fun one. Top right is my friend Maddie, who rides Whiskey very frequently. And we were dressed up. This was a ride in New Jersey. It was Halloween weekend.
I'm hoping it was Halloween weekend. Otherwise, you have a lot of style.
we have a lot of fun doing these rides anyway, but that was extra fun. And then the bottom right here is Cooper at the end of our first Vermont 50, and he was absolutely exhausted and convinced that he was going to stop right there. The crux of that photo was we thought we had 2 more miles to the finish, and it was actually just around the corner.
Oh.
So,
Better that than the opposite, right?
Yeah, yes.
The finish, yeah. For our friends on this call who maybe are thinking about trying a starter ride this year, what advice might you give them in terms of equipment?
I think I would generally advise to stick with what you have as long as it fits both you and the horse and you're comfortable in it. A starter ride is going to be long enough where you're going to get a really good idea of what distance riding is, but I feel like you're probably not going to have huge issues using the equipment you have. And as you start to do longer rides, if you take interest in it and you want to progress into longer distances, that's when you'll start to see, oh, this isn't working really well. I need to change my, how I do this, or maybe I need a different bridle. Maybe I need a hackamore. Maybe I need to try different footwear.
Right.
And it's not just the horse, it's you too. I was riding in, um hmm, here's a good one. I like to ride in jeans.
I out whenever you're in your jeans, I'm like, oh girl, how do you do that?
And I get that comment all the time, and I will tell you, recently, I think it has to do with the Western style stuff. I am just a jeans girl. I am more comfortable in my jeans. But with Hayes coming up the ranks, and he has that very, very nice endurance saddle that I bought. I
Mm.
don't dare ride in it in my jeans. So I brought breeches and they're amazing.
Ooh.
I love them.
Now you know why people wear them.
Yes. So it's stuff like that, and this is like 8 years after I started. I don't think you'll see me in breeches every time, but um, you'll see me in them more frequently.
Awesome. That's spectacular. And before we move on from equipment, I just wanted to point out, like in the photo you have in the upper left with Cooper, you're
Mhm.
wearing a body protector. And I think that's an important thing for people to be aware of too, that like, when it comes to distance riding, it's probably one of the most permissive sports in terms of what equipment is or is not, is allowed. I mean, it's pretty much anything is allowed, more or less, in terms of um, you know, protective gear for the rider and things like that. And where it gets a little bit gray is maybe like leg protection for the horse in terms of boots and
Yep,
things like that. But in general, like most equipment is permissible. So it gives a
yep,
lot of flexibility. So
definitely.
now you already told us when you were back in your rookie years at doing that 15-mile ride, right? That you were starting with your mentor and you were on Fritz, and you were really worried that he wasn't going to be up to it and that you weren't going to be up to it. So can you tell us a little bit about like what did your work with him look like before that ride, and how did you try to get ready for that first
Yeah.
experience?
I'm trying to think back. You know, Fritz, and all of my horses really, I just really like to trail ride. But the allure of the competitive trail and endurance to me was seeing new places and meeting new people and doing it in a timely fashion. But I think after that first ride, I do remember I worked at a bank at that point, and of course I worked like 8 to 5, so I had limited time. I have a much more flexible job now, but I would get up early, and I remember this. I would trot Fritz up the road 2 miles, and, we had, a little bit of warm up before that, but and then we would walk 2 miles back. So it was only 4 miles, but we did that probably 5 days a week,
Mhm.
and maybe on the weekends, maybe if I didn't get out every morning, I would take him on a longer ride on the weekends,
Sure.
and that was pretty sufficient for maintaining a season of 15s. That was really pretty sufficient.
Yeah. Well, that's really helpful to hear though, I think for people, because like so to cover that, to do your 2 miles of trotting and then your 2 miles of walking, like about
Mhm.
how long would you say that took you to complete that?
Mm, I'd say no more than an hour. Maybe a little over an hour if you include like tacking up and cooling down and grooming him at the end. And
Right, right. So that's like a really doable thing. And you were trying to do that conditioning work while you were doing a very traditional 8 to 5 type of a job. So
yep.
it's doable, right?
Hmm.
And you weren't out there doing 10 miles and 15 miles all in one go to get ready for that 15-mile ride.
Not at that point. Nope.
Yeah. 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 So if as you have progressed through your distance riding journey, like how does your conditioning look now compared to what it did?
uh, so now I'm very fortunate. I have a really good little network of trails where I keep my horses, and I have a really nice stretch of dirt road too. But all in all, I could probably only squeeze out 7 to 8 miles if I really tried. I have some good hills on it, which is important to know. I think hill work is really important if you're going to ride at GMHA. I definitely, I think it's important. I wouldn't like stress about it, but I think you can find hills anywhere if you try. Just Vermont. Um, but nowadays I actually tend to trailer off property on the weekends I'm not competing. I will take whoever's not on break out, and we have um kind of a local I don't it's not a state forest, but it's a kind of a local quote unquote community farm. And they have miles and miles of trails, and it's up a mountain. So plenty of hills.
Yep.
Um it's not really trotting worthy, but it's great for getting in long, slow, hard miles, which um maybe I'll just dive off a little bit. You kind of want to alternate between long and slow, and short and fast in your training is kind of my theory. Um some of the other things I'll do is I will trailer up to Woodstock, or I have a friend over in Springfield and we'll ride around the Springfield Dam, because there's quite a few trails out that way. And I think it's just kind of talking with other horse people. Like if I really tried, I bet I could find more people and new places to ride and condition. And that's kind of part of the fun of it, really. Because people kind of like to have company when they go out, and even on a conditioning ride where it's like zero stress. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Again, thinking about our friends who are with us tonight who might be trying to decide, is my horse ready? I don't, maybe they don't have hills, maybe they're not even in Vermont and they're thinking about coming up to GMHA. What what kind of benchmarks do you think they might want to reach for before they come on up and do one of these starter rides?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I would think, and I think we all struggle in our own way. Um, some people are limited to a ring, and some people, I don't have a ring. I would love a ring. I think putting in the effort. I think putting in any effort will pay off dividends in the end. If you only have a ring, look up some exercises. I actually do exercises out on the trail, like bending and flexing and stuff. But you have a ring, that's even easier in a ring. There's lots of things you can look up. If you have access to trails and hills,
Mhm.
that is definitely very helpful. Um, you know, as I think about it too, I don't have the background in this, and I am very jealous of people who do, because it's something I'd really like to put effort into when I maybe have more time in my next life. But I think people who really excel at this sport are people who couple this sport with dressage, because they understand how to they understand the mechanics of the horse and how to make the horse work the most efficiently. Um, I know my horses. It is something I could work on tenfold. Like Whiskey, our Wakalusa, is a completely different horse to Cooper, who's the 16-hand Morgan. And just kind of understanding basic biomechanics and understanding how to make them work more fluidly will save energy and either give you a better score if you're doing CTR, or it might get you to the finish line faster if you're doing endurance. Boy, that was tough. But I think that kind of summarizes what advice I would give.
Awesome. That's really helpful. And again, kind of encouraging, like, don't feel limited. Only if what you have to ride in is a ring, great. I remember I did an interview with Dr. Heather Hoynes, who is an accomplished endurance and CTR rider. She's won the 100 at GMHA, and some of you may know her because she's also a practicing veterinarian in Vermont. But she told me when she first started in the sport, all she had was a field to ride around the edge of, and it was about a mile. And she just rode around and around the field. She's like, yeah, that got kind of boring, but that was what I had, and I was really determined. So, where there's a will, there's a way, and as you said, if you really like it, you'll find ways to find new trails or new opportunities. So
Absolutely.
the GMHA starter rides are going to be held in the format of a competitive trail ride, or a CTR, as we often will call it. And at a CTR, horses and riders have a set window of time in which they are supposed to complete that ride. So that means they need to kind of have a certain sense of their pacing on the trail. Can you speak to your technique or your method for knowing if you're going at the right pace for your horse to complete a ride on time?
This is one of the things that I struggle with. It kind of like, just like I said earlier, I am a trail rider at heart. I love to look at things and observe my surroundings and lollygag. So I am not usually the first one across the finish line at an endurance ride. But that being said, I have learned a few tips and tricks along the way. One of the things that I have learned is that in a competitive trail ride, if you can do your first 5 miles in 45 minutes, that will set you up for a really good remainder of the ride. It's not always doable for me. I think I observe more people having an easier time than me when I have Fritz, and that is just because it's Fritz. He's dark, he's black, he's big, and he's a Morgan. He's difficult to pulse down, but on the other hand, he's also taught me a lot because of that. So we do try to do 5 miles in 45 minutes, and actually we've been getting a lot better at it. I think, that being said, and the starter ride folks are not going to have a hold, but if you do get to that level where you have holds, and those start at 25 miles, you would have a midway hold. I recommend being organized, getting your pulse on time, having a plan, and getting out on time, because that'll save you. It'll basically, you're not eating time that you should otherwise be on the trail. And maybe planning to walk in at the end to get your pulse down for the end.
Those are some great techniques. When you're out on trail, do you normally trot or canter? Like, do you have a preferred pace, or does it vary depending on which horse you're on?
It varies depending on which horse I'm on. So I would highly recommend trotting as much as possible. It always makes me a little nervous when I see people kind of galloping up the road, because it's a lot of energy that the horse is exerting to do that. Trotting is a really good way to kind of consistently make time and eat miles. But that being said, my horse Fritz, good old Fritz, he like I said, he has a lot of action, and the last few, I struggled for many years, because people always said, you got to trot where the going's good, trot, and I believed him, but I was dying. He's like a saddle seat horse, and if you can imagine trying to post to that, I would literally 2-point, because his trot is just so grand. And over the last 2 years, this was a game changer for us. We would canter, I'm just laughing at Jamie's comment here. We would canter where the road was soft, maybe a nice stretch of trail. We would put in a nice rolling canter, and it would save him energy because it was easier for him. It would save my back. It would save my gut. It was just a lot less exhausting to ride a canter on him. And I don't recommend it for every horse. I don't want to say it's a rare case, but it's something I've found works for Fritz. And like I said, we're cantering, we're not galloping. And Fritz is a very controlled horse. He's easy for me to rate. But that was one thing that really, he's really taught me a lot, and that's one of them. Every horse moves differently, and you have to learn how to make that horse move the most efficiently to cover the miles.
Right. Right. What a great example of, riding your own ride and doing the thing that works best for you and your mount, as opposed to, what you're supposed to do. It's quite a journey to figure those things out.
And
Right.
Chris, just to sorry, just to kind of cut in one more time.
Yeah.
I do get that question a lot from people, and I generally tell people walk where the going's tough, trot as much as you can, and if you want to throw in a canter because the road's really nice or the trail's really nice, do it. It changes up the gait, it makes them use different muscles. It's
Right.
really good for them not to trot the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so just kind of in a general sense, you've obviously been involved in the sport for a while and closing in on 3,000 miles, and who even knows how many miles of conditioning and other rides along the way. Um, are there any things you kind of know about distance riding now that would have been really helpful to know when you first started back in 2015?
Oh God. Everything.
She's written a
But
book, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll write a book for everyone, okay? Um, I think we've touched on a lot of it, but I'm trying to think of something new. Like the pacing thing was um definitely something I've learned. You know what? I'll bring this up. Nutrition.
Mm,
Nutrition was a huge game changer for me this past year. I had a lot of horses come out of last winter looking really rough. And it it really prompted me to start looking more into what to feed them, how to feed them, how often to feed them, what to supplement them.
right,
And I found that I just wasn't feeding in a nutshell, I wasn't feeding them A enough and B the right things. And I don't really want to get into specifics because I really think a lot of it's between an individual and their veterinarian.
yeah.
But that was a huge learning experience for me because initially I thought a leaner horse was actually a healthier horse when you're on the trail,
Right.
thinking that they don't have to carry so much weight.
Sure.
I actually disagree with that now. You want a horse with a good fat covering over their ribs because they need that. It's like spare energy. They need those reserves to carry them through the ride.
Mm. That's we could probably do a whole session just on nutrition, right?
You totally could.
Um,
We could.
Again, in the context of folks kind of just getting started, do you think that is something they should talk about with their vet first, or do you feel like that might not be, like I don't know where I'm going, but like should they
I
be changing how
yeah.
they feed, I guess?
I would say no, not right off the bat. I
Yeah.
would say don't change your feeding schedule. If you're going to do a starter ride at GMHA, don't change it. Don't start feeding your horse quarts and quarts and quarts of grain. They didn't. um,
We're
you
so
know,
hungry.
I know, but I worked so hard. I totally get it. I totally get it.
Yep.
But I do think it's important to start that conversation with maybe your trainer or your veterinarian, whoever your group is. Everybody has a barn family or a horse family.
Yeah.
um I bounce a lot of stuff off of my really good horse friends, and I'm like, is this stupid, is this not so stupid, like,
Right.
does this make sense?
Right.
Um so I would say don't go changing anything drastically. It's more of an incremental thing. It's I'm trying to think of a good example. One thing I started doing was feeding table salt in my horse's feed.
Mm.
And that was at a recommendation of my veterinarian for, I can't remember what it was, but um it's not something, I think it stems from a conversation with a professional that understands what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
that's kind of what I would summarize.
Awesome. Well, are we ready to look at a few more pictures?
Sure.
All right.
I have
So,
way too many, guys. I'm sorry.
So I had to break, I made this PowerPoint for her, and she shared a lot of cool photos, but I've had to kind of put two per slide, Sarah. So there'll be a couple
That's
here.
okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. This is great. So this one on the left is, oh, this is a really good one. Okay. So the one on the left is me. This is Fritz. And he has that old Fabtron saddle. I won't call it crappy. It's crappy now, but it did me well. Um, with a square a square Western pad, which held in way too much heat, but I know that now. And I've got a leather bridle on. We did have shoes on all four at that time, and he does have leg protection in the front because this was an endurance ride. This was not a competitive trail ride. And there's my saddlebags on my horn right there. So this was my first 30-mile ride. It was endurance, like I said. And that was in 2016, I think. I was pretty psyched I finished, but my bridle maybe was about ready to be tossed.
Yeah.
It soaked up quite a bit of sweat.
Yes.
But if we move to the one on the right here, I'm still in my square pad, still in my Fabtron. We don't have leg protection because this is a competitive trail ride. But I don't know if you guys can see, I have switched to a biothane bridle at this point. I also went from a snaffle bit to a Kimberwick because Fritz, as Fritz got fitter, he got a bit stronger, so I needed a little bit more leverage. And the other thing I can see as a difference in these two photos is I have a fuzzy girth on in the one on the left, and I have a string girth on in the one on the right. And this is kind of interesting, is that I bought so many gosh darn girths for this horse. It kind of like Jamie's saddle pads. And they all gave him rubs. And you know what? The dumbest thing is the girth that doesn't give him rubs, or rarely gives him rubs, is the cheap $12 string girth you get from Tractor Supply. That's one string thick. And so I just go on Amazon and I buy them in bundles now. And and he gets a fresh girth at the start, and if it's a longer ride, he gets a girth change in the middle, and works just fine. Works like magic for him.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. All right, let's see what we have on slide 2.
Okay, so these are also Fritz. The one on the left, I'm trying to think what year that is. Maybe 2019. I think that was 2019. So some differences here. You see that I have hoof boots on in the back. He's shod in the front. This is about the time where I started to discover he needs to be shod in the front, hoof boots in the back. If he's shod in the back, he pulls his shoes. But if I have boots in the back, he can't do that. And then if I boot it all around, like I said before, he tosses the boots. So shot in the front, booted in the back. We have a new biothane bridle. This is because I didn't like the version with the bit hangers. This one is a headstall and a halter, and they snap together, and that worked a lot easier when I took it off at holds. So same material but different style. I still have the Fabtron in that picture, and you can't really tell, but I have a different saddle pad in the one on the left. And I'm using a Skeeto pad, which is much more breathable. I don't I always say it's like memory foam. It's not really like memory foam, but the padding works a lot better. It's a lot more friendly for longer distances. And tack like that. I'm trying to think. Oh, the other thing I can see here is I have a cell phone holder. I don't go anywhere without that thing now. But I strap it right to my leg, and that way, if I fall off, my phone isn't in my saddlebags, and it's on me.
Yeah.
I can also reach it easily to check my GPS, my mileage, and whatnot. Scooting over to the one on the right. So this was at the Brookfield ride last October. I actually don't have boots on in the back in this photo, and that's because the trail was really, really barefoot friendly. So that being said, can you ride barefoot? You can. You just need to be really smart about it. Your horse needs to have good feet. They need to be nice and hard and durable. And I definitely wouldn't be doing a lot of rocky rides, but it was just this stretch of road, and then it was this nice soft dirt for the rest of the trail. And it worked out great.
Nice.
I have another Skeeto pad. So that's a Skeeto pad, that green pad. And that is my new Tucker saddle that I use with Fritz. You can also know I have gloves on because it was cold. But there's my watch that I use, and I have a digital watch on my wrist there. I carry a spare Easy Boot with me. One on each side. I actually have a spare Easy Boot for both his hind and his front. And then he has a quarter sheet on the back because it was very, very cold. And my friend Jenny makes those and she sells them. But it's actually waterproof on the outside there, and then fleece underneath. So it's nice and warm. But if it was to rain, then there would be a little bit of waterproof there. And it actually rolls right up to the cantle. Yeah, the cantle.
Nice. So if you don't need it, you can just tuck it up and it's out of there.
Yep.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Moving on.
Okay. So, this is, I have so much to talk about. Okay, so this photo on the left is at Pine Tree in Maine, and some of these photos I included in here just because they're so cool. I really want to convince people to join the sport because this is the stuff you see. Like we rode through this river. Goodness, I can't remember the name
Is
of
it the Saco, right? Isn't the
yeah,
Saco?
the Saco,
Yes.
yeah.
Saco.
And the every time I go through it, the people in the canoes are always like, "Oh my God, look at the horses!" And they have tubes and canoes and they have all sorts of stuff. But they're going really slow. It's a very slow moving river. And the horses actually do very well with it for the most part.
Yeah.
It's a very cool experience. So on the left here, don't mind my lead rope. I let it slip. It's very naughty. Cooper's in an S hack. A couple of things I wanted to point out here. I have chaps on in this one. Yes, that's because jeans chafe. And I have a sponge. And my saddle or my saddlebags have no longer have a horn, so now they're on the cantle there. And that actually works really well. They're out of the way, but they're still really accessible. I don't think I have anything else to say about that photo. The one on the right. So here's a really interesting one. This one was taken in Tennessee. I went to AHA, which is Arabian Horse Association Distance Nationals back in 2021. So this was a really cool ride for me, but the things I wanted to point out on this photo were I have a jug, and that's for sloshing water because Morgans have a tendency to get really, really hot. And that's just a way to get more water on them quicker than sponging. The other thing I wanted to point out here as we were walking in was I have my rider card in my left hand. It is in a plastic bag, and I don't think that this is very important for a starter ride, but I did want to point out this is one of the things that I learned when you're on an endurance ride. You're given a rider card and you have to carry it with you for the entire ride. And I learned very quickly they get very disgusting. So I just take a 1 gallon plastic bag, Ziploc bag, and I fold it up and I put it in the bag and I carry it in my my saddlebags, and it's worked out really well. It keeps them nice and dry. I also have my protective vest on underneath my penny here, which is why maybe I look a little more buff, but but I do wear that protective vest. Cooper is a lovely horse. But he has his moments, and in a new environment, I do like to have a little protection, and nobody should be ashamed of that
Right.
at all.
Absolutely not. No, you do what you need to do to make
Hmm.
yourself feel safe for sure. I mean, and just to speak to your point, like not only do you get to go into these amazing places sometimes on distance rides and see amazing things, there often are photographers taking amazing photos of you. And, they're photos that none of your equestrian friends will have, I promise.
No, nope. Nope. Okay, so this is Maddie on the left. She's riding my Wakalusa whiskey. Contrary to him being a Wakalusa, we actually don't let him Wakalusa much. So he gates, but we don't let him. Oh, so whiskey hates the flies, and we went through quite a few different fly mask kind of solutions, and we found this one with ears and these strings coming off of it, and it works wonders. He loves it. But I think I really wanted to show this picture because it shows the treeless saddle that he goes in. He has caged stirrups, which are very popular for distance riders. So your foot doesn't actually go through the stirrup if you accidentally fall off. And this is a really good example of using what you have. These are Maddie's saddlebags, and they're big and gaudy. But she had them, and my saddlebags didn't fit that tiny saddle, but hers did. So we used them, and he never had a problem with them. So just an example of using the equipment you have. You don't need to go out and buy a gazillion dollars worth of new equipment. Use
Right.
what you have, and if you have a problem, change it out. There's just, I don't know, maybe I'm too frugal, but um and then the one on the right here, this is Cooper again. He's got 4 hoof boots. But this one I kind of wanted to point out. I have a poncho on. It is raining, and that poncho has saved me more times than I can count. It actually folds into a backpack, and you can carry it with you. But super, super handy. Just another piece of equipment. As you get kind of more into it, because I know all of you are going to want to do these rides. Just something to put on your wish list. Maybe ask your husband or your mom or your dad. A good Christmas present.
Right. Awesome.
Okay. Oh, yep. And here's Maddie. So this picture I wanted to show. This was actually at the Springfield Dam ride. This is a really, really fun ride for anybody who wants to do this. It's actually probably one of the flattest Vermont rides out there. And it's at Wellwood Orchards in Springfield, Vermont. Very popular. They have a 15-mile ride too, so very doable. But I wanted to show this picture because we have Whiskey's mane. I'm gonna say braided. It's actually just a bunch of ponytails, and then you split the ponytails in half. And we do like 3 or 4 rows of this, and it allows his mane to get off of his neck because it's so thick. Whiskey got the walking horse genes in the hair thickness department. And he gets very, very hot underneath his mane if we don't take it off of his neck. So this was a really good shot of it, and I just wanted to share it with everybody.
It looks like macrame.
It's really pretty, actually.
All right. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the vetting and sort of during the ride and at the end of the ride. So
Yeah. Okay. So this one on the left is in Tennessee. This is Fritz. This was at the end of our 20-mile or 25-mile limited distance endurance. And you can see me, I'm trying to get him to put his head down. And this is because it kind of helps to lower the pulse when their head is down. Fritz isn't super good at it, but somebody got a really good shot of it. And so I just wanted to share it with everybody. That's kind of one of the tips and tricks things that I've learned over the years. And then the one on the right here, this is my husband James looking super enthusiastic. But I think I probably had to run to the bathroom or something. And he's holding Fritz. This is at a hold. It's an endurance ride. Fritz has leg protection on. You can see he has ankle boots in the back, and he is eating his hay. We have a cooler on him because this is October. While the sun is warm, they've come off trail. They're hot. You just put cold water on them. They vetted out, and now I have, I don't know, probably about 30 minutes. The holds are longer in endurance rides. And James is kind of allowing Fritz to chill and decompress for that time period. He's got that blue bucket there is sponging water. The orange bucket is drinking water, and then the red bucket that he's eating out of probably has mashes and stuff, but he's decided that hay's much better.
Right. Well, he is the all-knowing, right?
He is.
I love when I set up wash water, my horse decides that is actually the best drinking water, and like I'm not gonna stop him, right?
The ride, we did the mud ride this past Saturday. And Maddie and I did, and both Fritz and Whiskey, she rode Whiskey, they both drink out of their their wash water.
Excellent.
Or like they had fresh clean water right next to it, but
right, not good enough. No, thank you.
Yeah. So these are two pictures. This is a ride in Maine. This is Dr. Joan Hiltz on the left. You guys will meet her. She is amazing. She is probably one of the most inspirational people in this sport, or these sports. I just wanted to kind of show you, this is them. These are two vets vetting out the horses. Joan is on the left with Whiskey, and she's probably testing to see if he's got any back soreness. Looks like it's maybe at the end of the ride because he's kind of sweaty there. This is Dr. Art King on the right, and he is also doubly amazing. Cooper can be a little bit of a funny chap, so Art is just kind of allowing him to sniff him and get used to him. And the point I kind of wanted to make with these photos, especially Art's, is that, you know, the vets in my experience are really, really willing to kind of go out of their way and help you. Well, we don't want horses being uncontrollable. If you have a nervous horse, or, you know, maybe they're a little shy or something, the vets, they're really good about helping you out and like looking, you know, listening to your horse and getting you through that process safely and having a good experience for your horse as well.
Right. Well, and if I can jump in on that, I think that's one of the best parts about distance is as you're going along, you know, you mentioned in that first ride that you did, you were so worried about your horse, but there are vets and experienced lay judges keeping an eye on you and your horse through the whole thing. So if there is actually any kind of metabolic or lameness or soreness, if there's any problem brewing, they're going to catch it. If you don't, and they're gonna make a decision and help you keep your horse safe. So I mean, you're so supported during the rides, and they want you to succeed, and they'll do what they can to help you be successful. And even if success means you're done for the day, right?
Right. But they'll encourage you, and I think just to carry on from that, even if you are done for the day, I have been done for the day lots of times. And after every time I maybe have to pull or I get pulled, I always get a ton of really helpful suggestions from the people that have looked after us throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really nice feeling to know that you've got experts, like, true experts, right? Keeping an eye. I love the photo on the right. I love it.
Oh my gosh, that's my potato pony.
Although the one on the left is very cute. James looks very cute.
This is my husband James again, because I think Maddie was running late. She doesn't always come with us. And we were vetting Cooper and Whiskey out together. So James got to trot Whiskey, and so this is him, and he's got a really nice smile on his face, and Whiskey's definitely perturbed. He's got his ears back and you can't see him, but Whiskey knows what's coming. So this was just an example of a trot out. This one on the right always makes me chuckle. I remember when I posted this on Facebook, somebody said, "Oh, he's out of gas." Yeah, he's out of gas. This is Whiskey, and Maddie and I had finished a 25-mile CTR in Pennsylvania. This was at the Muckle Rats ride in late July, and Cooper's doing a really good job, you know, kind of chilling and, you know, reassessing and coming down off the ride, and Whiskey's just decided he's gonna all out take a nap.
They know what they need, right? They know.
They know how to recoup.
Absolutely. Awesome. So,
And
sorry to me, were you going to add more there? Sorry to me.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say this is at Brookfield again, years ago though, and this is again what happens when you bring an unenthusiastic husband to the mix. But he's a good sport, so.
Um, so I have a few questions in the chat, and Deborah asks what your post-ride care is, both on the day of the ride and then the following week.
That's really thoughtful question. So it depends. I don't like to give people straight answers because there's so many factors in these things. It depends a little bit on the horse. It depends on what the ride is like, but I think the biggest determination is how far did you go?
Mhm.
I know some people have like I almost always give a baseline of a week off, no matter what they did. If it was a particularly hard ride, or if we're like in between two hard rides, and when I say hard ride, I mean like two Vermont 50-mile rides. So that's much more significant than a and I don't want to say significant as in like a belittlement, but it's a lot more distance than a 15 per se. Where was I going with that? I I think I would give more time off. I would probably be more likely 10 to 14 days in a situation like that. Um, that's kind of looking at it long term, and that's just in time off. Maybe if I backtrack to the day of the ride, um, so again, this is tough. This is tough because it depends on where I am, what I'm doing. So if I'm at a ride, further than 4 miles out from where I am located, I'll wrap legs on the way home. If I'm just at GMHA, I don't tend to wrap legs because I like them. They just go out to stretch and move around all night after they come home. I do give mashes for a few days after that just to get more hydration back in. But I also find that the more seasoned the horses get, they kind of do that themselves.
Hydrate, you mean? They take care. They
Yeah, they
yeah.
do. They start to take care of themselves better. Hmm. I'm hoping that kind of encompasses some good points, but that's a
Yeah.
tough one.
Well, and Deborah also asks if you use electrolytes, and if so, what and when?
Okay. Yeah. So again, not a straight answer. But I like to what do I use? It switches around sometimes. I think right now I'm using Enduramax. It's a powder, and I give it in their grain 3 days prior to the ride. I find that at the ride, my horses are kind of fussy, and they won't eat their grain.
Hmm.
With electrolytes, they'll be like more likely to pick at it, and I want them to get the food in.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't put electrolytes in their grain at rides, but I do have and I actually haven't seen anybody else ever use this, but it's the Farnham. I think it's called Apple a Day. You can get it at Track Supply. And it comes in a tube. I think it's like 60 cc's. And I like it because I like the increments, but I've also had a lot of vets say it's a decent electrolyte paste with a good buffer too.
Mhm.
So that is what I'll use at the ride. Let me take a deep breath here. So it's sort of this is where I just can't give a straight answer, but it depends on the heat. It depends on the humidity.
Mhm.
Um, it depends on the difficulty of the ride. But if I had to generalize what I do with electrolytes, I would say one of the things I've learned over the years is that It works better if you give more small doses than less large doses.
Gotcha.
So to kind of explain that, um, years ago, I used to just do electrolytes before I left,
Hmm.
at the hold, and then at the end. And in recent years, I have started to break it up so that I sort of gauge where my horse is at, but I give them electrolytes now at when you go to GMHA, it's really easy to do it at each water stop. So you almost have I almost have an electrolyte in between the hold. So I have the start, the in between, the hold, another in between, and then the finish.
Gotcha.
And when I say smaller doses, maybe I'm giving 10 cc's of that apple a day, apple light, whatever it is, as opposed to 15
Gotcha.
increments. That's a rough idea. It doesn't work for everybody. Every horse is different.
Yeah.
That being said, but
Excellent.
hopefully.
It sounds like we've had some good product placement for Tractor Supply tonight.
I think the Tractor Supply, yeah, yeah.
So Pam commented that two things she learned early on by mistake was getting better, wider stirrups instead of regular irons, and to absolutely make sure your saddle is not pinching the horse's shoulders going downhill, because as a flatlander, that was never an issue until she got to GMHA. And I definitely noticed that you talked about the cage stirrups, but it seems that you also prefer like a wider platform for the stirrup itself.
Definitely. Pam actually brings up a couple good points. And just a very brief story. I did have smaller stirrups, and um one of the things that people will tell you when you start out is don't ever change anything last minute. Don't ever change any of your equipment the day before a ride, because you don't have time to get used to it. And I did just that. I bought a pair of wide stirrups and I was so excited to use them. I bought them at the tack store next to GMHA, and I switched them out right before I did my first 35-mile CTR.
Hmm.
Terrible decision, because my muscles were not conditioned for those stirrups. And I died. I absolutely died. I was totally over time, but I did finish the ride.
Okay.
And Fritz was a saint and he took care of me. But the other thing I wanted to add for the hills, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. I use a breast collar. And in all the photos I showed, I use I think it's like a felt, also from Tractor Supply. um, but I have since switched to a biothane breast collar that I've actually bought all the horses biothane breast collars and will be incrementally switching them out, but going back to I'm not doing it the night before a ride. So
Right.
so they may still have them on for a little while yet.
Gotcha. Awesome. And Jamie just offered as a comment, our fellow panelist, Jamie, that she gives 1 week off per 25 miles, I think is what that message says. So we have another question from Deborah. If you have ever found a good app for tracking mileage, she has tried the Apple app. That's a mouthful. Apple app to track walking distance is not very accurate. So do you have an app that you use that you like?
I do. I was a sucker for an app called Endomondo back in my college days, and that thing did me so well. They had like a you could change the options, like you're hiking or you're running or you're canoeing or whatever. But anyway, they had polo too, but they had horseback riding, and I use that, and it'll track like your route and your miles and your time, and I've never really had an issue with it being really off. I don't think any of them are perfect, but
Right.
it works pretty well. The other one that I've liked, and I think that a lot of people use, is I think it's called Equilab.
Mm,
I think that's really cool because it shows you like where you trotted and where you cantered and
yeah.
where you walked and like how like the percentages of what's what. I downloaded that, and for whatever reason, probably just my own personal preference, I just didn't like it as much.
Sure.
So Endomondo was discontinued.
No.
Um,
Oh no.
but it was put out by Under Armour, and Under Armour came out with a new app called Map My Run. And that is currently what I use. It talks to you too, like it says, you've made 1 mile in, I don't know, 15 minutes and 43 seconds. And your lap pace, which is how long you've been out in total, it'll give you that too, which is kind of helpful. But it's just like Endomondo, and it has a riding option. So that's what I use right now.
Awesome. Very cool. Um, well, I don't see anything else. Oh, something's popping up in the chat now.
Kathy.
Kathy Hall's adding that the Garmin watch gives a very accurate reading of the distance that you have traveled and also gives you lots of other info. And
Yeah.
there are some Garmin watches available that I know can even pair with a heart rate monitor, an equine heart rate monitor. So,
Oh,
or you need to get like a little conversion kit and take a human heart rate monitor, but then you can actually, check your horse's pulse as you're going along, which is a super fascinating exercise. So,
judging by my technological capabilities this evening, I think I'm good.
Sarah's gonna keep it simple. um, Awesome. Well, I don't see anything else coming through in the chat right now. So on behalf of the GMHA team, thank you everyone for joining us tonight and for bearing with us through some of our technological problems. As we mentioned at the beginning, this was recorded. It will be posted onto the GMHA's YouTube channel. And we hope that you will share that and share on social media the link, so any of your friends who maybe missed it tonight can join in. And then one last plug, our first starter ride of the season is open for entries, so get those entries in. And thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Have a
Yeah,
great night.
thank you guys.